Welcome back. It's still Hot Seat with me, Akintayo, and we're asking, how can Africa's natural resources be harnessed to benefit Africans? I still got here His Excellency, the former president of Botswana, and also Dr. Kojo Busia. Dr. Busia, I was discussing with His Excellency the issue of weighing the options in Mozambique. Should we go for agricultural land or extract the minerals under it? Your opinion about that, because it's something really controversial, and also the government is being careful.
Yeah, no, I think governments increasingly are looking at the strategic, relative strategic advantages of either exploiting mineral resources or using land for other purposes. And here I think this is where the African mining vision comes into, becomes very useful. This is a vision that was initiated by the African leaders themselves. A series of studies were undertaken by African experts on, first of all, mapping the geological mapping of the resources available on our continent and how they can be optimally exploited to the advantage of the people of Africa. So I think what we have is a vision that will provide a sense of what are the strategic value of the mineral resources that we have. And here at ECA, we are in the process of establishing what we call the African Mining Development Center, which is essentially operationalizing the vision. Different aspects of the vision will be studied. Technical assistance will be provided to African governments, and that will allow them to make these choices, either to exploit or to use land for other purposes. So I think the time is very appropriate to provide this kind of support to African governments who are looking for ways and means to optimally exploit their natural resources to the ultimate benefit of the citizens.
So your opinion, do you think going for mineral excavation will be better than staying as an agriculturalist economy?
Well, it depends. It depends on the trade-offs. You know, there are some minerals that could lead to environmental disaster. So in the long term, I think that will not be a strategic thing for a country to do. You know, there's also the issue of, do you use land for minerals or use it for food production, for people, food security, and so on. So I think these are options that governments must study based on evidence available, and also based on projections of what the future consequences will be for the continent as a whole.
Yeah. His Excellency, we want to look at Africa's forest resources, which is actually the mainstay of energy supplies in Africa. There is this alarming deforestation in Africa. Actually, they say it's the second largest loss in the world. But a lot of people need wood for all sorts of things, even for domestic cooking. And sometimes we look at poverty in the land. So how do we go about it?
I mean, cutting wood for meeting social needs, such as furniture making, and such as for firewood. It's natural, but then when it appears, when the cutting reaches a level when it's beginning to impact negatively on the resource, then you have to do something about it. You must have to take mitigating action in the case of the social needs for fire. In the case of, the two are separate. In the case of logging, it's commercial. Again, to the extent that it may be permitted, it has to be controlled so that it takes place under conditions and to an extent that is consistent with conservation of the resource. In other words, the rainforest, it should not be degraded. What I'm saying is that whether it's ordinary trees and ordinary forests, or the special rainforests which have a special place, human beings or citizens or residents are entitled to make use of this for their social needs. But such social need must be controlled and directed so that it takes place in a way that does not necessarily adversely impact the availability of trees, including, where possible, the government must look for alternative sources of for instance, fire, of making fire, keeping hot or cooking, which may include, where feasible, having tree planting programs to replace the trees that have been cut. In the case of logging, again, I wouldn't say simply, no, it must not be done, because the people are entitled to a living. Now, if responsible logging, consistent with conservation, can take place, and the government or the state charge fees, and this activity creates employment and also some reasonable income, then it should be permitted, consistent with conservation. If it cannot be done, then it should not be done.
Okay, so let me take you.
But subject to the imperative that you have to live out of what you have. You have to live out of what you have. So that if a country has resources, it has to generate income, try to lower poverty, create economic activity out of the resources that they have. But they have to do so responsibly. And it is the duty of the leaders to ensure that this happens. They are the ones who have to seek advice as to how best it can be done to the extent that it is possible. It's not always an easy decision, but you have first and foremost to inform yourself and then carefully weigh the needs of the people on the one hand and the possible impact or negative impact of the activity that is envisaged. Cost-benefit analysis, always. And what I'm saying is that one of the things where I want civil society to be involved is that they become assessors or advisors to their own government, what they are prepared to lose or what they are not prepared to lose. And it is the government to make explicit to them the hard choices that the nation may have to face.
Yeah, Your Excellency, I want to take you back to July 2009, the AU summit where they talked about declaration on land. The African heads of state and the government came together to look at how to solve the problems of land acquisition, land grabbing here and there. There are so many challenges there, we know. But it's like these days we find leaders, even from Africa, grabbing land from their people, even former leaders. It happens a lot, especially in places where they had military governments over the years, like Nigeria.
We see that's the problem, because there it is that the leaders themselves have discussed and come to the conclusion that land grabbing, to the extent that it takes place by leaders, is wrong. Therefore, leaders should desist from doing that. And I then keep on, I feel compelled to keep on explaining that, of course, we must define what constitutes land grabbing. If it's land grabbing, it means that whoever is grabbing is taking land more than what he is entitled to. He is taking more land unfairly or by crooked means, which is wrong. That should not happen. I suppose it goes back to the question of democracy, that leaders should be elected free and fair elections, elections with integrity. In other words, elections that were not bought or where intimidation was not used, cheating was not used. But assuming they are leaders like that, which again, these are moral questions, then they should remain accountable to the people. And once accountable governance is the case, then some of these problems would not arise. I don't mean the objective problems of difficult choices. Then the difficult choices would be made by the leaders with the support of the majority of the people, or the support of the people in the majority of cases. Because I grant that there will be occasions on which some of the citizens or groups of citizens, maybe an ethnic group, maybe a geographical area, can act selfishly, looking at their own interests to the exclusion of everybody else. And so there are cases where the leaders acting responsible can do something that a section of the community, to which a section of the community is opposed. That's permissible in real life. Nobody is perfect. But what I say is wrong, reprehensible, and really not permitted is actual grabbing. Where it's grabbing, where using the power, taking advantage of one being a leader. That's corruption. That's wrong. Corruption is wrong, and lack of responsiveness to the people is wrong.
Okay. On the final note, Your Excellency.
But that's why I tell to you, Hore, when you say, "What is my take?" My take is that if we are doing that to a very large extent, then I'm frustrated. I don't know what to do.
Sorry,
because in fact we have been condemning that. We leaders and we Africans. You and I don't like leaders who cheat. We don't like leaders to be corrupt. We don't like leaders to grab, and we should say so.
Dr. Busia, let's look at the issue, still talking about land acquisition. A lot of people say that there is always this issue with the government or investors because they feel that people, the international bodies like the UN, the AU are not there for them. So activists want to do the fighting on their own, and they always complain that they are never there for them. So what's your take on that?
Well, I mean, these are national questions. Of course, the UN has a role in terms of creating a normative sort of standards for some of these acquisitions or any form of exploitation of natural resources, including land. But I think these are issues that must be mediated at the national level, ultimately. Of course, these are also issues of human rights. If people are alienated from their lands unjustifiably and have to suffer undue hardships, deprivation of livelihood as a result of that, I think that becomes a human rights issue. And of course, the UN has a number of programs that protects people who have been unjustly removed from lands and so on. So there are a number of initiatives in countries that could be used to mitigate some of the effects of these. But perhaps more ought to be done at the international level to have a sort of a legal regime that perhaps could prevent some of these things. If you look at the area of conflict, the UN has this responsibility to protect, whereby if citizens of a nation is not protected by its government, the international community has a responsibility to intervene on behalf of the citizens. So I think ultimately this is another form of security, human security, issues of land, food, access to the right to livelihood. It's a human security issue. So I think perhaps the international community ought to come up with more normative standards, just like the responsibility to protect citizens who are unjustly removed from their lands. That is a basic human right.
Yeah, because
so I think
I'm saying this because I just want to point out the case of the young lady in Kenya who has been fighting the government, and she's been complaining that the international community has been silent. But to be fair to the UN, the United Nations Environment Program has done a lot for the Ijaw people, actually gave them the legal backing to know their rights to go to the International Court of Justice recently. So it's like, what would you say about the Kenyan case as against the Nigerian case?
Well, I think citizens have a right of recourse to international bodies to protect their individual and collective rights. I think there's nothing wrong with that, and the UN agencies are actually doing precisely that, to protect citizens within countries whose rights may be violated.
Okay, Dr. Busia, on the final note from your end, what do we expect from this conference? Because there's been a lot of build-up, and we're expecting so much to change in Africa from this conference.
No, I believe that this conference is a turning point. It is actually bringing together all the stakeholders on issue that almost every stakeholder agrees on in terms of what needs to be done to protect Africa's natural heritage, natural resource heritage, and also to optimally exploit the natural resources to the ultimate benefit of the continent. Historically, that has not been the case. I think Africa's natural resources has shaped its history, its current, and perhaps its future as well. So I think this conference actually provides an opportunity for all the stakeholders, African, non-African, citizens of nations, civil societies, and so on, to come up with a common platform that will guide and shape the manner in which natural resources is exploited for the benefit of Africa and indeed for the humanity, because there are some global environmental consequences of natural resource.
Okay, to President Mogae, on a final note from you, a lot of people have said so many things, that there's been so many conferences on land grabbing, mineral exploitation in Africa, and you've come up with this program to change things. And what do you think will happen?
Because it has been happening. You have been quoting instances. It's those instances, and it's the perception of the African people that we, their leaders, are not playing fair. We are taking advantage of them. We are betraying our mission. We are betraying our responsibility to them. That is why the chorus of a complaint has arisen. I am hoping that now that more and more people, including educated Africans, including uneducated Africans, rural and urban Africans, are pointing out some of our weaknesses, we are human beings. I'm sure we will respond in a positive way.
His Excellency President Mogae, we have to leave it for now, and I want to say thank you very much for coming up with such a program to turn around the lives of Africans for the better. And also to Dr. Kojo Busia, keep doing the good job, and we say thank you to you too. And to our viewers there, thank you very much for staying with us. Remember, we're still in Addis. The next edition, we'll be talking about the great continent of Africa, with its vast natural resources. Why are Africans still poor? Many thanks to our executive producer on this edition. That's talking about Max Bankole Jarrett and the whole team, which came here to Addis to record this beautiful session for all Africans. From me, it's goodbye.